In Washington state, the political leadership right now is actively working to take your guns, to take your freedom, and certainly to take as much of your money as they can get. The question is, what can you do to change that outcome? Thank you for watching We the Governed. Today we're going to be going back to Washington state, where the legislature still is in session and where your freedoms and your pocketbooks are still at risk. In the city of Olympia, home of many homeless camps and way too many politicians, there's always lots of drama as we come down to the last couple weeks. But there's always danger for any of the regular citizens who live here as we come to those last couple weeks, because this is when they negotiate the budget, and this is when they negotiate with those last couple bills, the ones that have lots of drama and that are usually the most harmful to us. This is when they're going to be coming down to those final elements of the debate. And during this legislative session, as we've discussed before, one of the themes has been from the legislature, particularly Democrats in this case, is that they definitely want to take away your ability to defend yourself. They don't like your guns, and they certainly don't want you to use them to protect yourself. They also, and this is a particularly high priority, want to come up with any excuse in any way to take as much of your tax dollars as they possibly can. These are high priorities. Now, we've talked about the Governor Inslee, who wants to be the climate king. He wants to be able to declare martial law if he says there's a climate emergency, and there's always a climate emergency with this guy. We've talked about this before. This is his high priority. It is something that he's been pushing for a while, and the Democrats have generally been supportive of that scheme and that approach. However, Governor Inslee really does have quite a few accomplishments. He's getting ready to finish up his second term as governor, and he has a lot of accomplishments that I'm sure he seems to be proud of, and something that all voters in Washington state should be aware of. For example, he has attempted to raise taxes more than 20 times. What's interesting is when he ran for office originally in 2012, Governor Inslee promised us, and he said repeatedly, that he did not think Washington state needed to increase taxes one bit, that we could continue providing the services that the taxpayers of the state expect at the budget level that we had. And of course, once the election was over, Inslee immediately turned around and started to shove new taxes down our throats, and he has been doing that every single day that he's been in office as governor ever since. And unfortunately, when the Democrats have been in charge of the legislature, which has been the last couple years, they've been going along with him, and so a lot of new taxes have been shoved down our throats, passed through the legislature, even though when the advisory votes come on the ballot, people say that they don't like them. But Inslee's quite proud of these tax increases. He has also been governor in charge of the state when some of the largest raw sewage dumps have ever occurred by wastewater treatment facilities into Puget Sound. Now, Governor Inslee claims that he is the Orca governor. He claims he is the green guy. He claims that he really cares about the environment. But when he's approached about these big raw sewage dumps in Puget Sound, he really doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't even want to address them. In fact, usually what he'll say, as he's told people at town halls in the past, listen, I'll get around to solving that, but the most important thing is I have to change global climate change. I got to change global warming. That's my priority as governor. And he also wants to take out the dams in the Columbia River and wipe them out, so that that's part of his green agenda. Let's wipe out the entire infrastructure of generating power in Washington state, and let's just ignore the raw sewage that these treatment facilities are dumping into Puget Sound on a startling volume and on a regular basis. In addition, Inslee is quite proud of his record with the Department of Corrections, where he has accidentally and inadvertently, due to a computer glitch that was never fixed, released over 5,000 violent offenders back into the community and released them early. This has allowed those violent offenders to victimize more Washingtonians and, in fact, murder a few of them along the way. Inslee's quite proud of that, and he seems to be pursuing policies that continue to make us unsafe, not just with those felons that he releases out of our prison system, but this effort to invite more of them in by declaring that we're a sanctuary state and that we sure as heck won't turn over violent felons when we find them, as long as they're illegal aliens. But this is his priority, and this is something that he's quite proud of. But that's not enough. He actually has all kinds of other accomplishments as well. Under his watch, the state mental hospital, the Western state, has been decertified. through a series of years of neglect and incompetence and just horrible management, this facility has been decertified by the federal government, and that takes a lot. And of course, those people who have mental health issues, are also being released and unleashed on the citizens of Washington State, so that they can continue to not just not get help themselves, but to inflict their pain and suffering on larger numbers of citizens who live here. Under Inslee's leadership, the traffic has not gotten better. In fact, the congestion's gotten a lot worse. Some of that's the direct policies of the governor, where he's basically allowed the Department of Transportation to say that congestion relief is no longer a priority. Now, it is a priority for them to take billions of dollars from the taxpayers and give it to light rail. Take a 19th century technology and let's dump billions more into it, regardless of how few people read it and ride it and how few people actually use it. They will take billions and dump it into that. They'll take billions of dollars and dump it into trails, but they're sure as heck not going to fix the congestion, which means that if you've lived in Washington State, you recognize that the congestion's only gotten worse, the traffic's gotten worse, and under Governor Inslee's stewardship, it's likely to get even worse in the future. He's also quite proud of the fact that under his leadership, all the urban cities, especially in Washington, have basically become proliferated and identified with these unbelievable volume of homeless drug addict camps. It doesn't matter whether you're in Spokane or Seattle, Olympia, Everett, Vancouver, or Bellingham, provided your city is run by Democrats and allies of Inslee, you know what this is like. There's all kinds of homeless camps popping up everywhere, and no policies that the state implements is going to reduce that. They're kicking out lots of money to give grants to organizations, provided that they make sure that these homeless camps in Seattle, I know they've caught some of them up there, encouraging members of their camps to support political candidates to make sure they vote, and make sure that, most importantly, they keep getting more and more money. And this apparently is Inslee's vision for Washington State. Now, Inslee has always prided himself, or at least claimed, that he's going to be the green governor. He cares about the environment. And yet anybody who's been to a green space in any of these urban environments realizes that they've become nightmares, dumping grounds for used drug needles, toxic waste, garbage, stuff that homeless drug addicts have stolen from local neighborhoods and dumped out here into the wetlands. And this is a legacy of the green governor. Now, he thought that he would use that legacy to run for president, and the voters of America basically took one look at Inslee and decided that he was not a good choice. In fact, Inslee, under any of the polls, he was never really able to crack 1%. He's always wanted to be in the 1%, but he wasn't even able to get there in the polls with the voters and when he ran for president. So as a consolation prize, Inslee came back after spending millions of Washingtonian tax dollars for his security traveling all over the United States. He decided to come back and run for governor for a third term. That's not common. We have very few third-term governors in Washington State history, but Inslee figures that nobody really wants him in any other job, so he might as well come back for that one, which led to one of the stranger political kabuki theater sort of examples lately, when he posed with two of the leading Democrat contenders for this office, who had already declared and were planning to run for governor, until Inslee came back, and he did the political equivalent of a hostage video where he posed with King County Executive Dow Constantine on one side of him and Attorney General Bob Ferguson on the other, where they were forced to get up and endorse the governor for the third term. This is Inslee's legacy. Now, when we talk about AG Ferguson, we really can't ignore the fact that he has dedicated his life now, especially after he got reelected, to taking away and destroying the firearm rights and the ability of citizens to defend themselves in Washington State. Most obviously, a few years ago in 2018, where he pushed Initiative 1639. This was the billionaire-backed initiative that Bloomberg and a number of other billionaires in Washington State supported. And Ferguson did the unusual thing that while the Attorney General's employees were actually supposedly writing this neutral language for the title, Ferguson came out and did a press release formally endorsing the initiative before it was even on the ballot. And that has a great influence over the title, and there was lots of drama under this initiative. Basically, one of the things it did is it decided that if you're a citizen who legally owns a firearm and somebody's able to break into your house and steal it from you, and then they go commit a crime, Ferguson wants to make sure that you are charged with a crime as well. And this is one of his legacies. As unconstitutional as that probably is, he doesn't really care. It's just been one of many steps he's taken to take away your firearm rights and your rights to defend yourself in Washington state. He's made an effort to ban all semi-automatic rifles. That has failed in the legislature this session, but that's been something he's pushed. And of course, he's also been pushing to eliminate magazines, standard capacity magazines. Really, it's just a constant drumbeat of different pieces of legislation that he's been trying to push through to make it so that you can't defend yourself, to take away people's firearm rights, to ignore Article 1, Section 24 of the state constitution that says you have a right to defend yourself with a firearm, but he's been trying to erode that very aggressively since he's been Attorney General. And regardless of what they say, as each one of these pieces of legislation is proposed, every time one is able to get through the system, it is never enough. It's never enough. Just like the tax increases they propose, that is not the end. That is just the beginning. In their mind, that's just the start, and then they're going to have more that follows on behind it. Now, both Ferguson and Inslee didn't actually have this long history of being anti-gun in the past. In fact, Inslee had actually written a letter in the early 90s when he was a congressman saying that he was against the Brady Bill, which was a much milder form of gun control, gun confiscation back in the 90s. And he wrote a letter saying that it wasn't necessary. But of course, now that they are in political power, both of them seem to be doing their best to try to disarm or take away people's freedoms and rights once they get in there. And there's a good reason why. And the reason isn't taxes. Taxes drive almost everything that our bureaucracy and government does, particularly on the Democrat side of things. They always want more and more taxes, and of course it's never enough. But that's not what's driving them in this case. What's driving them in this case, when we're talking about the 1%, is Bloomberg. Bloomberg, who is running for president and former mayor of New York, who has more billions than he knows what to do with, he has been kicking in cash to Washington state, and he has substantial influence and control over Attorney General Bob Ferguson and over Inslee and their political allies. And he's been flying people in, his organizations have been flying people in from around the country to testify on some of these bills. He's been funding local organizations in the state of Washington and local politicians pushing this very hostile anti-gun, anti-self-defense agenda. And it's been a high priority of Bloomberg's, and therefore it's become a high priority for Ferguson and Inslee and the Democrats in the state. They see money falling from the sky, and they're going to do whatever they can to get as much of that as they can. And unfortunately, I think this is the big motivator right now behind a lot of the recent push for anti-gun legislation. And have no doubt, whatever gun that you may want to use to defend yourself, they are coming after them. It may look like they're only coming after semi-automatic rifles today, but it'll be your pistols tomorrow. It'll be whatever firearm you own. The last thing they want to do is to let you have the ability to defend yourself. They are happy to unleash these violent felons into the community. They don't want them to go to jail. They want to keep putting them back in there. They want to protect them. They want to let them live in homeless camps, victimize you as often as possible, because what could go wrong? And but they sure don't want you to have the ability to defend yourself. And this has become, unfortunately, part of their agenda. Now, the question always comes up, what can you do about it? It's not enough to know that there's a problem. As we mentioned earlier in the video, you need to know that there are things you can do to make a difference. And the most obvious is voting. We talk about this all the time. I'm certainly not alone. But voting's not enough. You should vote. It's astounding what percentage of the population doesn't vote, particularly the percentage of population that probably agrees with you and I on these issues, that don't want homeless camps next door. They aren't part of the bureaucracy. They actually want the ability to defend themselves. They don't want to pay unlimited taxes, but surprisingly, a large percentage of them don't vote. Hopefully that's not you. Make sure you vote, but that's not enough. Make sure that everybody you know who agrees with you votes as well. You probably have people who you work with, people who are your neighbors, family members. Make sure they get out and vote. It makes a difference. It really does. Even if sometimes you're frustrated with the politicians that get in there, believe me, a bunch of the, particularly Democrat politicians in there right now, you cannot do worse than the people we have in there now. Let's get some new people in there who maybe aren't as hostile to your freedom or your pocketbook as the people who are there today. Finally, one of the things you can do is you can confront the politicians. And there's a number of different ways you can do that. When we say that, sometimes we're thinking about going down to hearings. I took this photo of some people who came down a couple days ago to oppose the magazine ban resurrection bill that occurred in Olympia with very little warning. They had just a couple days notice, and over 200 people showed up for that hearing. They filled multiple overflow rooms. It was an 8 a.m. hearing, and some of them only got 90 seconds to testify, but they showed up. They were there, they were in opposition, and they posed outside. Melissa Denny kind of led some of these people as well. Really have been impressed with what she's done with the Washington Firearms Coalition in Washington State. But we got a photo. I took this photo of them outside on the sundial, outside the Capitol, and showing up makes a difference. But it's not just showing up, telling the politicians who are passing legislation that you don't like it. You also need to show your support for those who are doing the right thing. Specifically, I want to call out Representative Walsh and Representative Jesse Young. Representative Walsh is from the 19th Legislative District. Representative Young is from the 26th Leg District in the Gig Harbor area, and Walsh is out in Grays Harbor. And both of these representatives took point in creating a large number of amendments to, in particular, the anti-regular capacity magazine bill that was on the floor. And they had over 120 amendments. They weren't alone in this. Many Republican legislators jumped in with them. So there's a lot of credit to go around on this. But these were the two representatives who really took point on this issue, did a great job organizing that effort, and it killed the bill on the floor. Now, even though the Democrats resurrected it as this ghost bill later, that effort still killed it in the regular session, and that made a big impact. People like this need to know that what they're doing is the right thing and that you support what they do. They don't just have to be your representatives. You can contact these people and tell them what a great job they did and how much you support what they did, and encourage not just them, but other legislators to do the same thing in the future when your freedoms and your pocketbook is at risk. Other things you can do. You can contribute money to politicians, not just where you live, but any politicians around the state who are doing the right thing, or if they're doing the wrong thing, contribute it to the people who are running against them. It doesn't mean you have to have huge checks. Political campaigns cost money. You can write a small check, a $10 check, a $25 check. It makes a difference. Set a budget for yourself and distribute that money around the state. If you like your legislator, donate to them, but also go and donate to the ones who are going to be in battleground races, particularly in Western Washington, who are coming in with the same goals and ideas that you have. They don't like the homeless camps. They don't like how Washington State squanders your tax dollars. They don't want to increase your taxes, and they don't want to take away your firearms. Support those guys and gals. Help them have the resources so that instead of being in the minority, your ideas can be in the majority in Olympia. That's a big deal. Another thing, this is a little self-serving, but I don't know what else to do about it. We can't trust the regular media to report on these issues. And so when you see videos or stories like this that report on what's actually happening, share those widely. Share them with other people, subscribe, push it out. It's about getting the word out, and it's very important to do this. Bloomberg and these billionaires have the ability to distribute their ideas far and wide, and there's plenty of people who will take paychecks from them and make sure that their word gets out. But for us to oppose the 1% in their effort to take away our firearms, the only way we can do it is just by word of mouth and distribution of information like this. So share it with others. You never know who you might influence in that process. Finally, if you think you can do a better job than me, and I'm sure you could, do your own research, create your own stories, do your own videos. This isn't a monopoly that anybody has. The more people that do this, the better off we all are. I would love it if there were hundreds of people producing videos like this about other issues that are going on in the state, because I think a lot of stories get unreported. And if you feel like you want to jump out and do that, please contact me. I'm happy to help. I want more people doing things just like this and getting this word out far and wide. But at the end of the day, ultimately, you have to engage in the political process. You can't just ignore it. You can't pretend that it's going to just ignore you, because it won't. They always say that those who don't care about politics are making a big mistake, because politics care about you. They want your money, they want your freedom, and they always want to grow their own power base, the politicians and the bureaucrats and the special interests. And if you don't pay attention, if you don't get engaged and involved, believe me, that group is going to keep growing and growing. You have to stop them, you have to push back. And you have to push the agenda for freedom and lower taxes, less homeless camps, less crime. You have to push that yourself. It's not going to happen by itself automatically. The other thing to remember is that even though there's people, we oftentimes live in a state, this fractured political viewpoint where it's red or blue, Democrat or Republican, and I'm coming from the conservative side of the spectrum, but there's a lot of people that I've found, especially over the last few months and the last couple years, who have walked away from the Democrat Party, who are walking away from these crazy policies. They don't want to surrender all of their money to the state. They don't think the state can spend their money better than they can. They don't actually love having homeless camps next to them. They don't like being victims of crime, and they actually want the ability to defend themselves. And those ideas are radical, apparently, in Washington State, at least among the political elite. and a lot of them are walking away. Be open and welcome people like this. They are waking up, and you can say that you knew it before they did, and that's pointless. At this point in time, get more people to join with you and support the effort that we all want to make in Washington State to make it a better place. Because we have seen what the utopia of the left brings us. And it's not pretty. It's actually quite ugly, and it's nasty. And it's not the future that we want for our children. It's not the future that we want for our community. And it's not the future that any of us want, except for apparently the Democrat Party and the bureaucrats and special interests in Olympia. We have to get involved to make a difference. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn more, go to wethegovern.com. And if you think I missed something in this video, please feel free to add that in the comments below. And remember, the future belongs to those who show up.